In a world where mental health problems are used as common tropes in various forms of storytelling, therapist Ryan Engelstad and executive producer Mike Graham try to determine what lines up with real life and what is just exaggerated fantasy. Listen as we delve into the fantastical tales told about mental health in books, movies, and television. This is Pop Psych 101.
Welcome back to Pop Psych 101. I am licensed therapist Ryan Engelstad, here as always with my co-host, executive producer, video producer, Mike Graham.
That's me. I'm here. I'm sitting in a chair. I'm ready to go. This is going to be a good one, and I'm super excited.
We haven't recorded in a little while. We were able to bank an episode for the holiday week last week.
That's right.
So happy belated Thanksgiving and holidays to you and your family, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, we had a really good holiday. We got to see the families eat way too much food, as I hope you did as well. What did you do?
Oh, yes. Always lots of food. We had multiple Thanksgivings and multiple meals and multiple activities over the course of several days. So in some ways, still in recovery.
You went traveling, right? You actually drove somewhere.
I am lucky enough to be in driving distance of both sides of my family.
Ugh.
So we sort of do one Thanksgiving with one side of the family and then travel and do another Thanksgiving a couple of days later, which is disastrous for health and sleep quality.
Oh, man.
But very enjoyable.
Yeah, we used to have 4 Thanksgivings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because my mom and then my dad and then both of her sides as well. So we had 4 Thanksgivings and then 4 Christmases, and it was insanity. So we've actually gotten it down now to where we do 2 on Thanksgiving, and then we just go back and forth between Christmas each year. So it's better.
Yeah, it's, you change format over time. You kind of find what works the best for everybody.
Right. And that actually gets me thinking about, so this is our 10th episode. And last week, we did release Psychiatric Hospitalization and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and we kind of had a little bit of a different thing going. We had a guest host come on, and we're kind of wondering what people thought about that, having a third party, a different perspective. We're definitely hoping if you guys are listening to the show, if you listen on iTunes, head over to iTunes and give us a review. But just even come on our Facebook at PopPsych101 and let us know what you thought of that episode and the kind of switch up in dynamic.
Yeah, because that's certainly something that we can make happen more frequently if people are into it. If people get bored of just the sultry sounds of you and I's voice.
I don't know, Ryan. People love this high, weird, scratchy voice I got going on.
I'm sure they do. Well, that's what we want to find out with reviews. So if you hate Mike's voice, please let us know in reviews. If you love it and you love all the things he's doing with our audio and video around the internet, please let us know that as well.
Right. And speaking of my voice, Ryan, I want to lay something on you because of the episode. I want to lay this little thing I got on you.
Please.
All right. You ready?
I can't wait.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you think of that?
Well, I think it's appropriate as we sort of acknowledge what we're covering today, which is the iconic, in a lot of ways, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yep.
And iconic both in film and in soundtrack. I mean, so the oh yeah is right on cue with, I think, a lot of our feelings about this movie. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about it and really overanalyzing it, because it's what's fun about doing a comedy is that we can kind of play around with all the different ways we can interpret what we're seeing.
That's right. And I'm really happy that we're doing one that's a little lighter. We've gotten deep, we've gotten sad, and we need to have a comedy episode. So hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I make no promises. Therapists can only keep things so light.
You're an improviser, so...
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, for sure. There's ways for me to keep it comedic without forcing lightness per se, because I have some dark views on this movie.
Uh-oh.
But I'll try to sprinkle in some lightness as well.
All right, well, you ready?
Let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
It is a beautiful day in Chicago today. Temperatures expected to reach the upper 70s. Right now, 75 at the lakefront, 74 at Midway, 73 at O'Hare. And now, up in the sky, Don Nelson
Ferris.
with Skyview Traffic.
Thanks, Ferris. We've got scores of accidents. Tom!
What's the matter?
Oh, it's Ferris.
What? What's wrong?
What's wrong? For Christ's sake, look at him, honey.
Ferris?
He doesn't have a fever, but he says his stomach hurts and he's seeing spots.
What's the matter, Ferris?
Papa?
Honey, feel his hands. They're cold and clammy.
I'm fine. I get up.
No!
I have a test today.
No.
I have to take it. I want to go to a good college so I can have a fruitful life.
Honey, you're not going to school like this now.
Oh, fine. What's this? What's his problem?
He doesn't feel well.
Yeah, right. Dry that one out. You can fertilize the lawn.
Jeannie? Is that you? Jeannie? I can't see that far. Jeannie? Jeannie,
Bite the big one, Junior.
Thank you, Jeannie. You get to school.
Today, we are talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a 1986 teen comedy directed by John Hughes and starring Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller, a wildly popular, gnarly high school senior and the film's titular character. Alan Ruck as Cameron Fry, a keyed-up teen known for blowing a microchip or two and Ferris's best friend. Jennifer Grey as Jeannie, the forgotten child and sister to Ferris. Mia Sara as Ferris's girlfriend Sloane. And Jeffrey Jones as evil, vindictive, and overbearing Dean of Students, Edward Rooney. The movie. Ferris is sick and can't go to school. Or is he? Actually, Ferris is faking it. We watch as Ferris zip-zops and skit-scats his way into fooling his parents into believing he's sick and can't go to school. His sister Jeannie, however, does not dig the vibes that Ferris is laying down. Whoa! Because Ferris is such a rad dude, his parents give him a hang 10 and let him stay home. The problem is, this is Ferris's 9th sick day in his senior year, and he's gonna be held back if it's discovered and he is caught. What a bummer! He enlists his best friend Cameron and his girlfriend Sloane to join him on his wacky adventure through downtown Chicago. However, all is not right in the world of Ferris. The lame Dean of Students, Mr. Rooney, is busting his hump and trying to track down and prove that Ferris is faking it. Ferris and his gang experience some crazy hijinks while the town rallies around Ferris in hopes that he gets well soon. In the end, his sister Jeannie, who's been trying to catch Ferris just like the Dean, proves that she is one cool chica and lies to Dean Rooney just as he is about to nail Ferris and catch him red-handed. Our hero prevails, vanquishes his foes, and lives to fake sick another day. Save Ferris.
Wow.
Well, there it is.
As a child of the 80s, I appreciate the multitude of references and attitude that you really brought to that synopsis, Mike.
Well, I left one out. I actually had it in there, and as I was reading it, I said, I can't do that one. I don't think it's fitting. And that one, because I don't think we're ever going to do the movie that it's actually from, is Cowabunga.
We can find a reason.
Raphael, yeah.
Sure.
That's a Teenage
Yeah.
Mutant Ninja Turtles reference.
Anger management, absolutely. But yeah, so thank you for that wonderful synopsis of,
You're welcome.
of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So here we are talking about a comedy. I don't know if this is technically the first time, but this is certainly the most comedic movie we've talked about so far.
Yeah, we did Lars in The Real Girl, which is comedic.
Yeah, dark comedy.
And we've done a couple of dark comedies, but this one is definitely just a straight comedy.
We have to preface a lot of the things we talk about with this. We know this is a comedy, and the directors and writers are not necessarily intending to portray mental health issues. Nonetheless, it's an opportunity for us to say what type of people are being portrayed in popular media and what can we learn from the, I guess, behavior or different symptoms that they might exhibit that could be examples of mental illness or issues that other people may experience.
Right. And I just kind of want to chime in and say this episode here was inspired by something that I witnessed and I kind of went to Ryan and just had some general questions about something that was going on. I wouldn't even say real life, but online, something that I was witnessing. And so questions popped up around that. And I said, I'd really like to cover this subject. I didn't even know what it was. So that being said, Ryan Ferris, what are we looking at with him? He's faking it. He's already on 10 days, or he's going on 10 days, about to get kicked out of school or be held back a grade. What are we kind of looking at here today?
And we're going to put a bookmark in the experience that you had, because I do want to come back to that, because as I researched some of these conditions, if we call them that, I discovered something that is the exact description of what you discovered. So
okay. Oh, exciting.
We're going to come back to that. So with Ferris Bueller, we're sort of hyper focusing on this individual behavior of, as we said, faking illness in an attempt to get out of going to school. And also what he ends up experiencing over the course of the movie, which is possible financial gain. Obviously, there's some social benefit that he experiences as a result of faking this illness and exaggerating the symptoms that he's experiencing. So this behavior, this symptomatology that we're looking at, is known as malingering.
Malingering, yeah. So you said that, and normally we title our episodes very specifically, but when I said, what is this thing happening? And you said malingering, I just went, So what is malingering?
So malingering essentially is the fabricating of symptoms that could be mental health related or physical related for a variety of reasons, but often includes financial gain, avoidance of school or responsibilities or work or military service, obtaining drugs in some cases. So like going to the doctor because you want pain medication.
Oh, wow.
You malinger symptoms like that. Or even you'll see people fake symptoms of psychosis to avoid sentencing in criminal cases. So there's a lot of really interesting dynamics to why people do these kinds of things.
Okay. And as I was doing my researching on malingering, I came across that is focused on the two main ones was criminal cases and people trying to, claim insanity to get out of whatever punishment they're going to receive. And then the military. Yeah. So those seem to be the big ones. And the first question before we jump right into Ferris, I wanted to ask you and to see if you knew anything about was, as I was reading about all this stuff, it says that malingerers are incredibly hard to catch, is what I've been reading. And it's really important to find a malingerer, but that it's super hard to actually say when it's happening.
It's true. And it's because, like Ferris talks about in this sort of introductory monologue, they often choose symptoms that are hard to diagnose, to prove. So I'll up top, I'll say that, the sort of most commonly feigned symptoms are things like head pain, head injury, headache, things like fibromyalgia, which is essentially just like shooting pains in your body, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. The mental illness that's most often feigned are things like anxiety or post-traumatic stress symptoms.
Oh, not cool.
So absolutely not cool.
Not cool, dude.
Yeah, but there's a reason that people choose these symptoms, is that some of them are the easiest to claim without proof.
Right, because it's one of these things that they can't just run, an MRI or a CAT scan,
right,
or a blood test.
Yeah, so Ferris says, I'm seeing spots. It's like, okay, what is a parent supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Like, okay. And I would love to talk about the parent's response, but we'll get into that. But yeah, so he chooses intentionally these symptoms that are not necessarily going to land him in the doctor's office, but are severe enough to remove responsibility or, as he does, sort of get rewarded for in some cases.
Yeah, and he actually mentions that. So in the beginning of the movie, this thing starts right off with Ferris sick in his bed, quote, sick, and his parents standing over him and looking at him like he's this dying man on his deathbed. And he's, I don't feel good. So the two things I was going to ask you about that really stuck out to me in this scene was, one, like you were just talking about, the symptoms he decides to portray to his parents to get his 10th day off of school. He specifically picks the symptoms out so that it doesn't push him into the hospital. He says, I can't say I have a fever because then you might end up in the doctor, and then therefore he's not going to get what he wants out of it, which is a fun day off school. And then the other being the fact that he had a like patented technique, like I said in the synopsis, for doing this. I was wondering, in real malingering, is this a common thing? Do people work out a surefire way to get this accomplished? Are they avoiding doctors, like in really just looking for something for them? Are they actually wanting to end up being in the hospital a lot?
There's some shades of gray, and there are parallel diagnoses that we can also talk about that sort of resemble malingering. But in Ferris's case, as you mentioned, the planned out nature, that's not always how it starts out. But for people who are able to, over time, recognize the either financial or emotional gain that they get from fabricating the symptoms, yes, it becomes a more and more procedural, dedicated process of, this is what I say, these are the things that I pretend that I have, and I know that this is the way that people are going to react to me.
What is the goal then of malingering or faking it? Like, what would be the end goal for someone that, whether or not they started doing it on purpose or not, but they end up realizing that they're going to get these things, but like, what would be the end goal, I guess?
So, right. And this, the things that I mentioned up top, it's either that you're getting out of something that you don't want to do, or you are getting something that you do want, whether that's a reduced criminal hit sentence, financial gain in the cases of fraud, which are some other common examples.
So that's entirely the reason then.
Yes, absolutely. It's you're faking symptoms for gain of something.
Just thinking about that, my question would be, most mental health issues that are real diagnosable things are in, it's called, I think, the DSM-5.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the book of illnesses, right?
Essentially the sort of handbook that therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors use to categorize symptoms and come up with a diagnosis for their patients.
Okay. And I guess I'm just wondering, is like malingering actually listed in that one?
So what you're going to see with malingering is what we call a Z code, which is essentially not a primary diagnosis, but it could be a factor or a something that is prevalent enough to treat, but it's not necessarily the main issue. And the reason being that malingering is often a sign of some other problem going on. As I mentioned, if the person's malingering to get drugs, presumably they have a substance abuse problem.
Yeah.
If they're malingering to avoid, let's say, work or military service, maybe they've experienced some trauma within that place that they are malingering to avoid a traumatic situation. So we want to treat the trauma. If they're malingering to avoid school, maybe it's because of bullying or because of parental pressure. There are always underlying factors that would encourage this type of behavior.
So a malingerer is not necessarily a lazy person. Like, this isn't motivated by laziness.
Right. And obviously the caveats with this are that there are absolutely people who just straight malinger essentially as a crime, whether it's for fraud or to get out of criminal sentencing. Like, those are just people who use this as a tactic to get what they want. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't also have, stuff in their background that's really problematic, but there are people who just do this for bad reasons.
You had mentioned the parents coming up. To take it back to Ferris, like I said, we're in the beginning of the movie. He's faking it. He's got his list he's working out. And the first thing that jumped out to me in the movie, as far as people's reactions and things going on around him, were his parents basically being like, I don't know, just believing him off the bat. Even though this is the 10th time this year, it seems like it's probably been an ongoing thing. They just have no question. They just completely support him and are very sympathetic and want him, to feel better, and don't really even go through the trouble to check and make sure he's sick and get him to school to take care of his responsibilities. Is that a common thing, or what did you think about that?
Well, it is common in some senses that they are super enablers, is the way I would describe them. To your point, they don't really question his behavior. They don't take him to the doctor. They don't even give him a thermometer to actually check his temperature, which would be like the first thing I would think most parents would do.
Yeah.
You know, all these standard interventions for my child is sick, just like completely glossed over.
And it just brings me back to our original conversation before we decided to do this episode. And one of the things you mentioned was that malingerers are often very likable people who get people on their side with like kindness and
Charm. Yeah.
yeah, and charm. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. I mean, if it being common or not.
Oh, 100%. You know, and Ferris does this to a T in these initial interactions that we see with his parents. You know, the sort of baby voice to his mummy and daddy.
Ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
It's horrible. I hated it.
It is. It's so manipulative because we, the audience, know that he's not really sick. So we see him doing these things only an attempt to get his parents to walk away and to go to work. So Ferris is putting in these little verbal cues or manipulative cues to throw his parents off the scent, and they take it hook, line, and sinker. Really, for the most part, everybody does. Everybody that doesn't
Right.
see the fact that he's not sick is just like, oh man, that's so terrible.
Yeah. Oh, Ferris, did you hear he's dying? Yeah. And because as you find out as the movie goes forward, is that he is incredibly like popular and well liked by all groups.
Yeah, I love that secretary's line about, you know, all the different groups of people that just love him.
The wastoids and the
The dorks and the dweebs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so everyone really likes Ferris and just support him in this, but there are two characters in the movie that do not support Ferris, and one being his younger sister, Jeannie, and the other being the dean of students, Mr. Rooney, who's played, oh man, I love the actor who does him. He does it so well. But these people are played as villains in the movie, and from the perspective that we're looking at this to talk about this today, you know, I just ended up feeling bad for him because the dean of students is, you know, Ferris deserves to be reprimanded for if he's ditching school 10 times and doing it in a faking way. And then his sister, who I probably felt more poorly for, I suppose, all this sympathy and love is being shown to Ferris, and it seems like she feels forgotten, which is why I mentioned that when I was reading the synopsis.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm less sympathetic for the principal than I am for the sister.
Sure.
But yeah, and I think this is common with malingerers and perhaps is echoed in the experience you had in the online forum, where there are people that sort of rush in to help and to believe and to support people who claim illness or different symptoms. And then there are people that are like, wait a second, like, what's going on here? Like, is everyone just buying this person's story? Why are we all doing this? You know, the sort of questioner, the skeptic,
Right.
which is really his sister. And I want to take a second, and this maybe will be an ongoing segment, especially for comedies.
Uh-oh.
We'll call it Overanalyzing with Ryan.
Okay. Should I play some music here? Like some like... some like
Sure. Yeah. Because
All right.
it was watching this now as a therapist. Like, I don't remember last time I saw this movie, but the family dynamic that's at play here is fascinating because the different characters really fit some very familiar, what we call like dysfunctional family roles, especially so if you study or work in the field of addiction. It's very common for family members of the addict to take on these familiar roles. So real quick, the 6 roles are the hero, the scapegoat, the mascot, the caretaker, the lost child, and of course the addict.
Okay.
So as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, oh man, now there are 4 people, you know, in the main family, and we can easily identify, you know, the 2 parents are both caretakers, who we typically think of as enablers. You know, they cover up problems and responsibilities to keep everyone happy. The parents are very similar in that regard.
Oh yeah, easily. Yes. And the dad, I do have to point out when he's talking to Ferris on the phone and he says, "Love you, buddy," and he punches the air.
Yeah, of course. And the sister is what we think of as the lost child. You know, she's the quiet one of the family, kind of flies under the radar while other family members are kind of given more attention.
Yeah.
So she absolutely is the lost child. You know, she tries to point out to the parents, like, really, you guys are buying this? And they don't even look at her in that scene, it feels like.
I know. She's not even acknowledged, really. It's like she's not there.
Right, she's not there. So she would be what we think of as the lost child. And then we come to Ferris, and there's different ways for me to think about this. We could think of him as the addict in the sense that he's like a social recognition addict, or he's an addict of like thrill seeker addict, you know, or maybe he's just like hasn't found his drug yet. There's a lot of different ways for us to view this. But, and I'm going to blow your mind in terms of my perspective on this.
Okay, hold on. We got to say, we're going overthinking with Ryan Engelstad.
My theory on this movie,
Overanalyzing.
as I overanalyzed it, is that Ferris is actually the mascot, which is what we think of as like the comedian of the family, the person that uses sort of humor and sarcasm or silliness to lessen the stress caused by the addict's behavior.
Oh, wow.
I think my theory is that we do not see the third child, and that there is a third child either that we don't ever see in the movie, or he's just like an addict on the streets of Chicago and is unmentioned, the whole family.
Oh my God.
Because
I just got chills.
Well, why would the family be so enabling of their next in line, right?
Right.
They want him to be successful.
Yeah. Yes. They're going to support him no matter what he's doing in order to continue like pushing him forward.
Exactly.
Huh. Well, yeah, no. Okay, so mind blown. Did you see any like evidence like around the house?
So the only and the other reason I say this is that house is freaking huge. The
Yeah,
idea that there are only 3 bedrooms in that house, I do not buy.
Okay, so we have a third child theory by Ryan.
That is my theory. I'm sticking to it.
Okay, overthinking with Ryan Engelstad. Okay, so a couple of questions I thought were really important were, we talked sort of up top there about how it's hard to spot a malingerer, but as a therapist, have you had someone who's dealing with this that actually went to seek help about this and talk through and figure out? And if so, like, what does that look like?
I guess the best way to answer this question is that I don't know, because I have had people that I've worked with who have had, let's say, consistent complaints of medical symptoms. You know, as a therapist, the sort of most you can do in cases like this is to encourage that they get medical care for the symptoms that they're identifying. You know, I can't force anyone to get medical treatment, and it's not for me to accuse someone of faking medical symptoms. It's not exactly the best predictor of a good trusting relationship between therapist and patient. So unless a patient or a family is coming to me saying, I have this tendency to bend the truth on what symptoms I'm experiencing, I'm unlikely to be confrontational with a patient who might or might not be making up physical symptoms they're experiencing.
Right. Is this one of those things where like you just don't feel like it's your place or your job to do that like specific thing?
Well, and I would say not only that, but I am actually more likely to go in the opposite direction. So when I have worked with adolescents, you know, you'll get this sort of like attention-seeking behavior, whether that is things like this, like sort of making up stuff to avoid going to school, which is very common, or more serious things, threats of self-harm, threats of dangerous or rule or law-breaking behavior. My approach with kids and families in this situation is always to take the threats as seriously as you can.
Okay.
And because what that does, and what Ferris's parents didn't do, is you're saying you're sick and you want to stay home from school, you have to go to the doctor. That is just a point blank policy.
Yeah, if you're going to miss something important, especially with how much you've missed. And you said you have a test today.
Yep.
So if you have these important things going on, then we need to get you to the doctor and make sure you're okay.
That's right. So if I had a patient who was claiming that they had thoughts of hurting themselves or thoughts that they might use drugs, I would even in some cases take that more seriously than I thought they would, because I want to send them the message that I'm not just going to let this go and let you get out of going to school. or skipping a therapy appointment. If you're saying you're having thoughts to do this, then I'm going to call your parents or call the police.
Right. Yeah. If they're threatening, if you threaten your own life or something, like, you have to act, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the best thing for that a therapist can do, because if you show your patient that you're not going to take those things lightly, they are less likely to then make things up, because they're not going to see you as a person who's going to enable or support that behavior to give them what they want.
I guess what I was even wondering more is, has anyone, or do you think people, because it feels like in the Ferris movie, and I don't know if this is accurate to real life, and I guess that's why I'm asking, is the people that don't believe Ferris feel very isolated, it seems. They feel angry. I see anger, especially in Sister Jeannie. Now, Rooney is just comedically angry, and it's hilarious. But Jeannie seems angry that Ferris is easily believed, and she's not taken seriously at all. So have you, or do you know people that have dealt with this kind of anger over this specific issue? And how would you go about, like, helping them through this, or like, how do we go about that?
Yeah, sure. And it is anger. I think the symptom that I would say more typically see is just sort of exhaustion. So if you get a teenager or a person who sort of consistently presents this way, it does exhaust members of the family who don't just let it go, who don't just accept it.
You know, they don't just buy into it.
Exactly. Not just because of jealousy or because of anger, but because it's like, you can't just have like a normal family dynamic, to sort of our earlier discussion. All of the focus always has to be on this person or this problem. And I know, meaning like the sister, that it's not real. So that drives me crazy. I can't just sit back and play along. So it's it's that constant having to sort of decide whether or not to buy into the family's dynamic is exhausting.
Okay. So, and I mentioned earlier talking about how I sort of witnessed something that happened. And I was wondering, like, what advice would you give to someone that felt they knew something was going on and no one was hearing them? Like, as far as if there was someone that was encountered that they just knew was malingering, and especially in, like we said, I'm not going to go into it too much, but, you know, this involved, there was some money and some things. And I think that this person felt bad for the people that were being ripped off, and, and they definitely wanted to prove it. And this brings kind of a twofold question. So Mr. Rooney, Dean Rooney, is kind of the detective. And I'm wondering, if somebody felt like they needed to prove this to happen, like, what advice would you give? Should they just let it go? Should they prove this kind of thing is happening, or what?
It's a good question, because I think if I had someone like Jeannie in my office, let's just say because she is anxious or depressed or angry as a result of all these things going on, you know, the focus would really be on, and it's not, we don't necessarily call it like ignoring it or letting it go, but can we make a decision on, is this something that you want to invest your time in trying to control or intervene with? Or is it something that, are you capable of just trying to maintain what to you might be a normal relationship, in the sense that you don't pay any attention? This is ultimately what Ferris is trying to get, is attention.
Yeah.
If you don't pay any attention to the behavior, perhaps you can normalize what a relationship can be, that he doesn't have to act this way to get what he wants.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking again in this situation, and this is online, okay? So malingering, from what I've been reading, and like we said, this is for gain in some way, whether emotional, but financial especially, happens online a lot. For people that get taken advantage of in this way, monetarily, online, and remember, malingerers often get into, you know, they're very charming. They may get into your life and make you, especially online, and make you feel good and that they're this great person. And then you find out these things may be happening. How would somebody deal with the aftermath of this person they thought was something, and then they turned out to be the opposite? What would we do in that case?
Yeah, so it's really an issue of broken trust and broken sort of expectations of people, that realization that people could essentially fake these symptoms and fake these stories for either attention, sympathy, or for financial gain, the sort of nightmare scenario, which what there have been examples of recently, the work would really involve, because I think luckily, happily for me, this is not a super common thing.
Yeah.
So the work would really be about reestablishing your ability to trust people who claim that they have symptoms and being able to say, okay, even though I've had experiences where people claim they had symptoms and that was fake, that doesn't mean that that's going to happen every time. And that doesn't mean that it's going to happen to me. And that it also doesn't mean that I need to be a victim to these people. I can decide to sort of have boundaries or to have checks that I don't have to be taken advantage of by people that act this way.
Okay. Would you think that it would be okay if somebody experienced this to even going forward, like be a bit more skeptical, but try to remain open to people that really are honest and not just like throw them into this category, but still it's okay to remain skeptical?
Well, yeah, especially online, I think you need a certain amount of skepticism. After we had our conversation, I was researching this sort of phenomenon of people pretending they had different problems, especially in online forums. I do want to mention this diagnosis, which is not an official diagnosis, but more a recently researched phenomenon, we'll call it. And it's Munchausen by internet.
Oh, wow.
And the difference between Munchausen's and malingering is that we don't typically think of Munchausen's as a person attempting to seek financial or monetary gain.
Okay.
So Munchausen's is specifically and typically to draw attention, sympathy, or reassurance to themselves. And with Munchausen's, you're more likely to see people actually cause symptoms.
Oh,
so
wow.
with malingering, you could just fake it, as Ferris did. Like he's not actually experiencing any of these symptoms.
Yeah, they're avoiding the doctor.
Right. Munchausen's, there are sort of common examples of people like, lightly poisoning themselves. So they do have symptoms that they can go and show to a doctor or a family member.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And I hate to use the word crazy, but it's because it's so out there that people would resort to these methods to have their needs met.
Is this new phenomenon that you read about, is it people that probably feel a little bit more comfortable doing this online rather than to people in their real life?
Yeah, exactly right. Because it's easier to, whether it's with anonymity or the ease of access of sort of like medical pages and things like that, ways you can, essentially pretend to have certain symptoms or diagnoses, that it's just become more and more feasible for people to do this.
There definitely a lot there about malingering, and I hope that if anyone needed to hear this about and kind of understand why or what about malingerers or people that are Munchausen by online, I hope this does help there. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to tell you about a really cool podcast, and we'll be right back.
A quick break to tell you about the podcast Marvel Therapy Group. Marvel Therapy Group is a group of 3 Marvel superfans who have vastly different tastes in their Marvel interests. Tune in every Monday to hear Haley, Jack, and Joe debate and discuss topics ranging from Marvel TV, movies, comic arcs, and news. You can follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Marvel Therapy Group, and listen on iTunes, Spotify, and the Podbean app. And now back to Pop Psych 101.
All right, we are back. And we are on to listener questions. We have now started doing, in the second half of the episode, some listener questions that we have a Facebook group. We announce our episodes early. If you want to join the Facebook group and ask questions that you can have answered on the show, you would simply go to Facebook and search for Pop Psych 101 Mental Health Chat to join the conversation and get your questions answered. But Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and get started and start answering some of the people's questions. We did have a ton of questions this time. A lot of them got answered just in the top of us talking about things, but we have some pretty poignant questions, I think, that are going to really work here.
Thank you. Thank you, question askers.
Thank you, question askers. All right, so first we have CJ. And CJ asked 2 questions, and I thought they were both important to ask today. And some of these questions are going to be slightly talked about, but I think these are a little more direct. He says, how does someone go from sympathy seeking in this for looking for ways to capitalize? That's his first question.
Yeah, so it's a good question. for me, it kind of comes down to almost like behavioral economics, which is that a behavior starts. It might just be like, oh, I kind of have allergies. I don't feel like going to school, to the extent that that might be real. And then you find that your parent or support system, whomever, really goes heavy on the support. And it's like, ooh, that kind of feels good. I wasn't getting that kind of support before for whatever reason, but now I am. I really like that. I'm going to have to try that again sometime. So it goes from this like, oh, like it was cool to have people take care of me, to like, oh, what else could I get from being sick?
Okay. And so, and capitalizing, to clarify for CJ, I think is capitalizing in any of the ways. It doesn't have to be money. It can be emotional or any of these other ways to capitalize.
Absolutely.
Okay. So he had another, and I thought this is a really great question. We did talk a little bit about Munchausen's, but he's wondering, CJ, can malingering evolve into Munchausen?
Yes, because as malingering, as we said before, does not typically involve someone forcing themselves to be sick or causing themselves to be sick, as it often sometimes does with Munchausen's. So Ferris essentially even says something to the extent of, I'll have to have a new illness next time, or I'll have to have something even more serious next time. So the reason that malingering can turn into Munchausen's is that the sort of faked illness of things like seeing spots and clammy hands, that stuff only works for so long to get the same sympathy. So you kind of have to raise the stakes. And to the point that you raised before about the people in, Facebook groups or whatever, things like that, once you've heard a certain story frequently enough, you're going to get bored of that story. You're not going to give that person the same attention or sympathy after a period of time. So they have to raise the stakes. Oh, now this has happened. Oh, no, I can't believe. Yeah, exactly. So by having to raise the stakes, yes, the sort of behavior can evolve from malingering to things certainly worse than that.
All right. So next up we have Christine, and she asked a great question. And this one, like I said, this one is just more direct, and it's something we kind of went over, but I think this is really direct here. And Christine says, how would Ryan, she's talking directly to you, this is great. How would Ryan recommend addressing this with someone who you suspect is doing this, a child or coworker or employee? So how would someone go about actually talking to this person?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you kind of have to start off light, and to my earlier point, treating the symptoms as if they're real, to sort of give the opportunity for the patient to recant or clarify the degree to which they're sick. Because, so I'll give you an example. If Ferris's parents had said something like, okay, well, it sounds like you're not feeling well. We want to make sure that if you're not feeling well, we can get you the right kind of treatment. So we're going to take you to the doctor.
Right.
So then at that point, he's sort of forced into the position of accepting going to the doctor, knowing that he's not going to present at the doctor with any symptoms, and having to raise the stakes on his lie. Or he could be more honest, which is that he might say, well, honestly, Mom, like I don't feel good, but I also know it's not that bad. Part of it is just like, I don't feel like going to school today. And okay, now we have more truth. So let's deal with that. For with me, if I just make up a patient, if someone was, let's say, constantly complaining of headaches or constantly complaining of stomach pain, and despite, lots of medical evaluation, nothing was essentially shown. At a certain point, it becomes appropriate as the therapist to say, and I would upfront acknowledge, like, I'm not questioning the reality that you're experiencing. You very well may be in pain, but what would it mean if this pain wasn't real?
Yeah.
So get them thinking about the implications of the possible lie. Because the reality is, for people who have this behavior for a long period of time, they sort of convince themselves. And that's a lot of times what these pain or these chronic fatigue syndrome with this, which is just these people who, and there are forums for it, where people are just tired all the time with no explanation. So
it's just hard to call it.
Yeah. So they claim that they're always tired and that they can't work and that they can't take care of their kids. And so it's hard to tell someone that experience is not real. So all you can really do is introduce the possibility, which is why I said, like, what would it mean for you or for your family or for our treatment if this symptom was not real? Like, what implications would that have? Because you want to get them talking about that possibility, not to get them defensive, but just to explore the sort of perception that they have about this symptomatology that they're experiencing.
All right, so next question up is Hannah, and her question is it considered malingering when addicts do it to get drugs from doctors?
So I'll just preface my answer with yes, but to go into more detail, because this is becoming a more and more bigger problem, especially with things like the opioid crisis, where unfortunately there are lots of doctors out there who are just willing to write you the prescription if you claim back pain or foot pain or headache pain. If that pain is severe enough, the doctors are unlikely to want to put you through a whole bunch of tests to confirm a cause for that pain if they can just write you a prescription and you're happy enough to go on your way. So there are a lot of problems with the system, but yes, there is absolutely a common trend where addicts will fake or malinger pain or symptoms they're experiencing in an attempt to get what would essentially be, in these cases, legal prescriptions. So if they're a heroin addict, it's easier for them to fake symptoms to get Percocet or OxyContin. Similarly, on lower scales, it's easier for people to feign focus issues to get ADHD meds, college students. So this absolutely happens. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the drug one, too, the addict thing, as far as what I'm seeing, I mean, that one seems a little bit more driven by something tangible. Like, they have an addiction and they have to feed it if they're not getting treatment for the addiction. And so the only thing they can do is start malingering.
Exactly. Yeah, they sort of see themselves as being out of options to which to solve their addiction.
Their physical need for it.
Absolutely. And they see that as a way out, for sure.
Thank you, everyone, for the questions. There was a ton this week, and so thank you, everyone who did ask a question. But, Ryan, I think we had a couple of things that we wanted to kind of clean up here in the end that we thought about the Ferris Bueller movie, and I was hoping we could talk about those.
Yeah, so we did talk too much up front about Cameron, and I wanted to, because of the two characters, in some ways it's alluded to Cameron's possible mental illness struggles as well. At one point, Ferris says about Cameron, he's sick all the time. He feels better when he's sick, which I thought was such an interesting description. He's very manipulative and even mean, abusive towards Cameron.
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to watch when you're coming at it from this perspective. I mean, I know it's this comedy, but you're thinking about it, and there is a scene where Cameron's on the phone trying to convince Mr. Rooney to let Sloane out of school early, and he's not doing it the way Ferris wants him to. And Ferris attacks him not only physically very slightly, but definitely very much so emotionally, and hurts his feelings. And I mean, Cameron does call him out, but what really got me was, so Ferris hurts him. Cameron tries to walk away, and Ferris stops him. He apologizes and makes him feel better, and then immediately turns it back around and then says, well, it was your fault, so you need to fix it and do this other thing I need you to do.
Yep, back to manipulation. Yep.
I mean, to me, I was just like, that's abuse, so I mean.
100%. And we could do a whole nother episode on this about whether or not Ferris is a sociopath. The reason that we're not going that direction is that because he's technically an adolescent, even though he's played by Matthew Broderick, clearly in his 20s.
Yeah.
Is that Ferris Bueller is too young to fit the diagnosis for a sociopath. But he does fit a lot of those characteristics, as we mentioned, the sort of charmingness, the manipulation.
Oh, wow.
The uncaring nature for people, whether it's putting them in emotional or physical harm. Yeah, there's a lot of concerning qualities about Ferris that could lead to him having a very difficult future.
Well, this makes me immediately want to do an episode on sociopathy.
For sure.
Okay, so as far as Cameron, and I just wondered if you could speak on him a little bit more, because there is a scene towards the end, and if you've seen the movie, I'm sure most of you have, but if you haven't, go watch it. But Ferris manipulates Cameron into taking his dad's car out for the day. It's a really nice Ferrari, and it ends up, some bad things happen to the car. Too many miles are put on it. Cameron starts worrying. He actually goes into a catatonic state. They have to kind of carry him around town for a while, and they get him back home. I mean, he's upset, and he definitely displays here. He's got some real issues with his dad. He's scared of his dad, but he does go through and he says he's tired of being worried and thinking all the time. And he's tired of, and what got me is he says he's tired of wanting to die all the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching this film as looking at Ferris and Malingering, and now I'm just concerned about Cameron, to be honest with you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
His character is very serious and real when I'm watching it.
Yeah, and it's so funny because the license plate of the Ferrari is NRVOUS, nervous.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, it's not Cameron's car. It's obviously a wink of the director where it's like, yeah, it might not be Cameron's car, but this is what we want you to remember as you watch this situation happening. And yeah, so when Cameron sort of finds out how many miles are on the Ferrari as they're driving back from Chicago, from my point of view, he has what is sort of a panic attack. And that's the catatonic state after that is the sort of aftermath for sometimes for people with panic attacks, is that the panic attack sort of activates them so much. As you mentioned, the catatonic state, he's totally wiped out by it.
Well, I just really thought that just at least mentioning the Cameron aspect of this movie, because who knows if we're ever going to get to dive deeper into because I mean, looking at this and I'm like, wow, we could have done this like 4 different ways.
We really could have, yeah.
And, that just goes to show, I was talking to my wife that, man, they really nailed teens in the 80s. You know what I mean? As far as teen movies.
Yep.
Yeah, John Hughes and the Brat Pack, and just they really nailed teens. Like I was like, man, Cameron it's a really real character. So I did like that. And if we're doing scores, which I think we should jump into, I think that should be factored as far as Cameron's character should be factored into the realness.
Oh, 100%.
All right. So if you haven't heard the show before, Ryan rates on a 1 to 5 on accuracy to the diagnosis, and I rate 1 to 5 on whether it was a good movie. Ryan, what are you thinking this time? And what is your scale?
So I have to use the scale of Bueller. So out of 5 Buellers.
That's awesome.
So it's tough because I have to sort of differentiate what exactly I'm trying to identify as accurate. There's the Cameron aspect of, how real is his symptomatology. And then there's the Ferris stuff that we talked about with malingering, all that stuff. So
right. So if this is presented correctly, just because it's a comedy doesn't mean that they didn't nail the stuff we're talking about.
Right. Exactly right. And that's why I found very little fault with this. The only thing I think I really struggled with, and that's where I started to make up this theory of like, why is this so weird? Is the like parental response didn't feel totally authentic. And the sort of the school's response felt super exaggerated.
Right.
So to that extent, I gave it a 4. 4 Buellers, 4 out of 5 Buellers.
4 Buellers.
Yeah.
So I do want to mention right here, so you rate it 4 out of 5 Buellers. So something interesting of note with this movie, John Hughes, the director and the person who wrote the screenplay, he wrote this in a week.
Yeah.
So that goes to show that this is probably being pulled on something real for John Hughes, maybe.
And I think to that extent, like, don't we all kind of know those charming kids from high school who felt like they could get away with anything?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a relatable character trope.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's also why, like, I think for me, like watching it when I did, probably as a high schooler, Ferris Bueller was the coolest.
He was.
Oh my God. Like,
I love Ferris.
He's hilarious. You don't even really pick up on the manipulative stuff. It's just, oh yeah, they have this like funny friend back and forth thing where they tease each other and convince each other to do stuff.
Yeah.
But now watching it,
Cameron, you're such a funny guy.
Yeah, exactly. But now watching it as an adult and a dad, it's, man, screw you, Ferris Bueller. Like, be nicer to your friends. And if I were your parent,
yeah, you'd be grounded a lot, man.
Something.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rate this, and I always do stars on 1 to 5 of how much I like this movie. Okay, I'm just going to make this one easy. It's Ferris Bueller, man. This movie's great. So I got it a 5. It's hilarious. I was laughing all the way through the scene with Ben Stein when he is doing the Bueller. And then they go through and he's just given the history lesson and talking about tariffs and all the kids' eyes are just getting like more bloodshot.
Yep, glazed
and
over.
their lips are like drying out because they've been open mouthed for so long. Yeah. Hilarious movie, great comedy, totally a 5 for me.
Fantastic. Well deserved to John Hughes and Matthew Broderick. Great work all around.
Yep. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for today. We're going to have to get out of here. I just want to thank all the listeners for the questions that they asked. Like I said, if you guys want to join the conversation and ask questions, go to Facebook and search Pop Psych 101 Mental Health Chat so you can ask questions and get them answered on the air. And as usual, Ryan, thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you every week.
Thank you, sir. It's a blast.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so finally, we did a straight comedy and hopefully struck a good balance between serious and light in this episode. There are still some important takeaways, though, for anyone struggling with mental illness or supporting someone with these issues. First of all, and I can't emphasize this enough, if your friend or family member is complaining about or just reporting physical illness or injury symptoms, it's okay and even appropriate to take them seriously at first. Assuming someone is faking their symptoms can be just as dangerous as enabling their possible fake symptoms. Encourage that they seek medical care and then maintain whatever boundaries with that person you need to. Secondly, if by any chance you are consistently or just casually faking illness or injury like Ferris Bueller is, know that your actions may have more serious consequences than you know. What might seem like an innocent escape from work or school could have far-reaching impacts on your loved ones, and you're much better off getting your needs met through honest emotional expression. Finally, even though this movie is played for comedy, in all likelihood Ferris Bueller is a future sociopath, and his manipulative and borderline abusive treatment of closest friend, Cameron, is unacceptable. If you have a friend like Ferris who treats you this way, you should not accept it. Okay, now the parent, therapist, and me can relax. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Thank you as always to my co-host and executive producer, Mike Graham. If you like the show, please check out our social media pages. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and YouTube at PopPsych101. We are specifically on YouTube for our fans who may be hard of hearing. We also love hearing from our listeners, so if you want to give feedback or suggest something for us to cover, you can email us at poppsych101@gmail.com or join our Facebook group. For Mike Graham, I'm Ryan Engelstad. Thanks for listening to Pop Psych 101.